Hey there, writers! We are back again with yet another salty book review from Right or Wrong. This time we are doing Again But Better by Christine Riccio. I always pause because I'm not entirely sure how to say her last name. But we are doing Again But Better, which currently has a 4.5 rating on Amazon and a 3.6 rating on Goodreads. And as seems to be the theme with popular books and me, I am going to go against the grain. And unfortunately, I have to rate Again But Better a 0 out of 5. I can't even bear to give it a 1. I'm sorry, guys. So let's dissect this. So for those of you who don't know, I had a Twitch stream a while back. It's been a little dead lately because I've been moving. But on my Twitch stream, we had a book club. We read this book for book club one month. And it was a challenge for me to read. I'm not going to lie. I only finished it because it was a book club book. Had this not been a book that I was reading in tandem with other people for the specific intent of discussing, I would have DNF'd this thing after the first chapter. But I believed through and read the book. So there are a scad of issues with Again But Better, in my opinion. So many so that it's a little hard to know where to start. So I guess I'll start with the low-hanging fruit and just go right in with our protagonist, Shane. Shane is a 20-year-old college student who, when we meet her in the first chapter of the book, is on her way to study abroad in England. And Shane is, from the get-go, kind of set up as the not like other girls trope. She's, awkward, she's clumsy, she's not very sociable. She, by her own self-proclamation, has absolutely no friends, absolutely no romantic interest. She's doing college all wrong. She does note that she is in a pre-med track, even though she does not actually want to be in a pre-med track. She was there at the urging of her parents, who are pushing a successful life track on her, where all Shane really wants to do is be an English major and write the next great American novel. A little on the nose for the not like other girls, but we'll move on from that one. So from the beginning, I didn't particularly care for Shane, which, as my husband will tell you, is a horrible habit I have, where I tend to zero in on characterization. I read things and I watch things for characters. I'm a very character-driven person, and I'm a very character-driven writer. So when I don't like a character, it's a struggle for me to stay with something. And I've learned to hold my tongue when we're watching TV shows together, because I know how much it bugs him when I just, I can't do this, and I, want to dip out of the TV show because I can't stand the characters. So I have watched things with characters, but if I don't like the character, it really is hard for me to enjoy something. And I did not like Shane off the bat. She was very self-righteous, very whiny, very woe is me, everything's happening to me, I have no control over my life and no way of taking control over my life, everything sucks. And then you find out she actually did take control of her life, because the study abroad that she's on is not a pre-med track, as she told her parents, but rather an English track, so that she can, take a vacation from school while still in school. There's a couple things that I'm curious about with that whole setup. One, how a pre-med student managed to sneak a spot from an English student for an English track study abroad. Because as far as I'm aware, those trips are very exclusive. They're very hard to come by, and there's very limited spots. So the fact that they let a pre-med student who was not an English student take a spot on an English track already sort of made me feel like, this is the amount of research that we're going to get in the book. That's great. So, and it was, spoiler. So that was a bit of an issue for me. And then also throughout the book, you come to find out that Shane not only lied to her parents that it was a pre-med track, but conned her parents, essentially, to the point where she forged school documents pretending it was a pre-med track and pretending that was what she was going on, so that her parents would fork over thousands of dollars in order to send her on this trip, thinking it was a pre-med track trip. And which is more grossly negligent when you take into account that her parents are already paying for her schooling, her books, her living, her spending money. They gave her spending money on this trip as well. Her parents are funding her lifestyle, and she essentially conned them into sending her on a vacation to England, which really rubbed me the wrong way. As somebody with very generous parents, it really rubbed me the wrong way. Aside from being arguably criminal and committing fraud. We'll get back on that. So back to the actual story itself. We get to England. Shane trips over her own feet upon entering her new dormitory. She trips down the stairs of her dormitory because being clumsy is also a not like other girls trait. Bella Swan. Sorry, had a bit of a cough there. But gets there, we meet Babe, one of her roommates, Sarah, whose name is spelled a little reverse, Sahra. We meet those two. We instantly click and become best friends with Babe, which I also find a little weird because, she self-proclaimed that she has no social skills and absolutely no friends, and voila, now she has a friend. It was very loud, I'm sorry. But, so there was that. We meet another boy before we meet the love interest, where, everything slows down and the lights dim and the music swells, and there he is, right across the courtyard. Pilot Pen. I wish I was kidding, but I'm not. So Pilot Pen is our love interest of the story, and it doesn't take very many chapters to realize that this is not the coming of age, finding yourself, learning to follow your own dream story that the book cover would have you believe it is, but rather the story of a college girl's obsession with a boy named Pilot Pen. That's the story. That's what everything revolves around. We hear a lot about Pilot. We hear a fair share about Babe. Very little about the rest of the roommates. They're sort of passing token representation characters. And very little about schooling or classes or anything, unless she's thinking about how screwed she is if her parents find out that she conned them into this trip. But we hear a lot about Pilot. We get mentions of her classes maybe 3 times throughout the whole book, about the classes that she's taking on this study abroad. We only see one actual class plus an internship, and they're mentioned about 3 times for a page and a half each. That's the extent of how much of an English student she wants to be and how much of the great American writer she wants to be. Mostly she wants in Pilot's pants. So, which is proven a little more difficult than she initially thought, even though he is incredibly receptive to her, incredibly flirty. They're having moments left and right and doing the heavy eye contact and the flirtation. And then it's kind of dropped as a bomb on us and Shane that, oh my God, he has a girlfriend. His roommate drops it in a conversation oh, Pilot, did you get to Skype with your girlfriend today? I was on it for a while. And Shane is just oh my God, he has a girlfriend? But he was flirting with me. But we're in love. But we're supposed to live happily ever after. How could this happen? And then the rest of that part of the book there's 2 parts of the book, 2 separate parts. So the first part of the book is just basically about her obsession over Pilot, who, while flirting with Shane and while kind of wanting to have his cake and eat it too, shows absolutely no interest in breaking up with his girlfriend. Shane has this inner narration of, we're so perfect for each other, we're soulmates, we're meant to be, we love all the same things, Lost and Harry Potter, super, niche things that we share that I'm sure his girlfriend doesn't. There's a brief moment where the girlfriend visits that the author tries to paint her as some sort of evil bitch, where Shane leaves a diary-style notebook open on the common room table, and the girl picks up the notebook and is trying to figure out whose it is and notices just pages and pages of, I love Pilot, Pilot's amazing, this is what we're doing, I wish he'd just break up with his girlfriend, goddamn that girlfriend, I wish she would just disappear, blah, blah, blah. And she confronts Shane about it, and Shane's like, oh my God, I can't believe she'd read my stuff, she's such a bitch. And the narration is meant to make you think that the girlfriend is horrible and make you root for Shane. It didn't. I still hated Shane. I was like, that girlfriend. Don't get me wrong, the girlfriend deserves better than Pilot. Like, she should break up with Pilot, but not because he should be with Shane, just because he's a dirtbag who's trying to cheat on her. So we go through that. The climax of the first half of the book comes when Shane's parents unexpectedly visit. They drop in on their daughter and they're like, surprise, we wanted to see how you were doing, and like, you know, you're on a college student budget, we want to take you guys out to dinner and like see the town with you and like do all the fun touristy things. And all Shane can think is, oh god, they're here to ruin everything. So they arrive, they're at dinner, they take the whole dorm out to dinner, and everybody's sitting there. And then it's sort of forgotten throughout the book, but I guess it was mentioned a few times that Shane had actually like concocted a web of lies about being on the med track and involved her roommate Sarah in it, who is actually on a med track, which makes me wonder why she had to forge a bunch of papers. Like, just show her the med track. Just show your parents the med track papers. But she like involves Sarah in her stories to her parents, but never told Sarah. Like, never gave this poor girl a heads up of like, hey, yo, I'm lying to my parents and you're very intimately involved in my lies. So parents come, they're trying to talk to Sarah about the med track and about her being in the med track with Shane. Shane's sitting here like frozen in fear, and Pilot for some reason decides to try to step in and keeps trying to like interrupt Sarah and step all over Sarah, and comes off really rude to her parents. And her parents are getting kind of like, dude, like, back off. We're trying to talk to this girl. Like, if you don't want her to talk, maybe you should leave. But like, he and Shane are exchanging little glances, and he's like, I got your back, babe. And it's just, it's a weird attempted bonding moment between them. So naturally, Sarah's like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. We're not in the med track together. Shane's on English. I'm on med. Can you, like, stop? Parents blow up, freak out on Shane. They break her burner phone and tell her she's getting on the next flight to go back home. A lot of fans of the book, or perhaps I should say fans of Christine Riccio, who is a popular booktuber in her own right. A lot of her fans touted this as like borderline abusive, given the father does raise his voice. He is yelling in a restaurant. He does break her property and all of that. I don't know if it's the 90s baby in me, but I didn't really read abuse in that scene. I read an angry adult who found out that his adult daughter conned thousands of dollars out of him and got like a free vacation to England, essentially, where she wasn't really doing much. And reacting angrily. Should he have broken her phone? Obviously not. You shouldn't break other people's property, but it's like a little burner flip phone. So I struggle to be like, oh my god, child abuse at that. Because one, she's not a child, which might be part of the issue, because she reads like a child. The narration that we get from Shane is like reading a middle grade novel of a 13-year-old, not an independent 20-year-old in college. So it is easy to forget that Shane is an adult during this story. So it's easy for people to look at that and be like, oh my god, you're abusing your child. Well, she's 20, so not really. But so they freak out, break the phone, tell her she's going home. She retreats back home with her tail between her legs. Once she returns home, we have a time jump, a 7-year time jump, which kind of came out of the blue, but yeah, it's whatever. It's fine. 7-year time jump, and she is finished with her medical degree. She is currently scouting or interviewing with, I'm not really sure how it works, but I don't think they're called apprenticeships. Like internships, apprenticeships, what you do before you're actually a doctor. So she's scouting those, and suddenly gets it in her mind to look up Pilot, who she hasn't spoken to in the last 7 years. She's actually currently dating somebody who we meet for a page and a half. Like, we only get a page and a half of the guy that she's with. She like briefly mentions they've been together almost the entire 7 years, that they're preparing to get engaged, that, you know, they're a pretty serious relationship. And then that page and a half ends, and we never hear about that guy again, ever. So she's in the same city as Pilot, and she knows she's in the same city as Pilot because she's been stalking Pilot via his social media for the last 7 years, which to me seems a little stalkerish considering you only knew him for like 3 months. She decides to just pop in at his place of business, at his job, and demand a post-mortem of their relationship, their non-relationship, I should say. So Pilot, being a better person than I am, because I'm not gonna lie, if somebody who had a crush on me 7 years ago for like 3 months in another country showed up at my place of work and was like, can we talk about us? I probably would have called security, possibly the police. That just reads stalkery to me, and I have watched too many episodes of Criminal Minds to think that's going to end well for me. Pilot, on the other hand, decides to go ahead and go get coffee with her. So they go get coffee. Oh, I forgot to mention, there is a weird copper-haired nameless lady that keeps showing up in random places, and you're kind of like, oh, like, you've shown up in like 3 different scenes. Are you important? Like the same copper-haired lady. That's the description. That's all we get. It's just like that person just shows up. So she, I guess, is somewhat important because she shows up at this coffee shop that they go to randomly 7 years later. Mentions, them missing out on an opportunity or them wishing something or something along those lines. And they get back into the elevator to leave. And Shane's talking about how she wishes she could just redo those 3 months that we had together all those years ago and blah, blah, blah. And Pilot's kind of like, if only. How long until the elevator gets there, buddy? Well, the elevator never gets there. It comes to a grinding halt, seems to, like, fall, like, down the elevator shaft. We're not really given a clear explanation of what happens, but essentially it starts to fall. They both kind of, like, brace themselves, like, their eyes shut, and they brace themselves. And when they open their eyes, they're back in time. They're back at study abroad 7 years ago for some reason. No explanation. We're never given an explanation, guys. There's a random time travel in the middle of the book, and it's the stupidest thing. I'm sorry, Christine. It's the stupidest plot twist. This is where things really, like, before here, it was just, Shane was a really aggravating character, so I wasn't really enjoying the story. But I could overlook all of that. Like, I could find positive things to say about it for book club. You'll notice I haven't been able to do that here because the remainder of the book murdered it for me. Like, what happens after that weird, unexpected jump back in time just killed any shred of any goodness in the book. So let me tell you what happens here. So they go back in time. They're both like, what the F, dude? What's happening? What's going on? Why are we here? Why is this study abroad? Do you have any idea what's happening? Shane kind of comes to the realization of, oh my God, I said I wished we could have a do-over. Like, this must be the do-over. Sure, that's logical, I guess, if you're in an episode of Black Mirror or Twilight Zone. But, so eventually they meet up with the copper-haired lady, and she tells them that this is their do-over, and that if they decide to take it, they basically just get to relive those 7 years, like, but making different choices. It's like a do-over for their lives, basically. Which, keep in mind, Pilot never asked for. Pilot never expressed any interest in or want in. This is all Shane. Pilot just kind of, like, got dragged along for some reason. And tells them that if they don't decide to take it, it's not quite as easy. There's a hidden amulet that's a button that, like, sends them back to their regular time, and they won't remember anything about this whole weird time jump. But they have to go through their previous adventures and whatnot in order to find the amulet, in order to press the button, in order to be sent back home. So, like, if they never find the amulet, they're reliving the 7 years anyway. Pilot's given no choice in this. He's just, like, here all of a sudden. So, they decide to go looking for the amulet. They redo all their stuff. They're, like, sharing moments again and whatnot. And sort of talking about how they are in the current day and age, like 7 years in the future, but mostly just kind of like reminiscing. Pilot is like focused on finding this amulet. He is like, I want out of here. We need to find this amulet. I don't want to relive the next 7 years. I didn't want this. I don't know why I'm here. I want out. And Shane's like, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. You know, to note, Shane's life isn't that great in the future. You know, after her parents blew up on her and she went back home, she did the medical degree she didn't want to. She and her parents have a very estranged relationship. She doesn't seem to like or even really care about her boyfriend / possible fiance. She basically just made all the worst decisions in her life, and now she's regretting it, which is why we get the time jump. Yeah. Again, poor Pilot just kind of got dragged along against his will. So they find the amulet. It's at dinner, and they're eating, and Shane somehow bites into the amulet. Didn't realize that there was like a full-on amulet in her spoon. It was just like on the amulet, and was like, oh my god, there's an amulet in my soup. So she bites down on it, realizes what it is, and then she leaves. She takes that amulet and she bolts out of the restaurant, leaving Pilot in the restaurant wondering what the heck just happened. So she runs with the amulet. He figures out what must have happened and like goes running after her. And they have kind of like a little showdown in the streets of Italy where they were, you know, hanging out with their friends and eating dinner and whatnot while on vacation, because it seems none of them ever went to class. So here is the part that killed it for me and killed any semblance of this possibly being a romance story. It's supposed to be a romance story, but it's not a romance story. It's not a coming of age story. It was supposed to be a romance story, and then it managed not to be that either, because they're arguing about the amulet, and Pilot is sitting here going, I want to go back to my own time. We need to press that button. I want to go back to my life. I want to go back to where I was before I unwittingly got dragged into the past with you, literally. And Shane goes, no, and like physically holds the amulet like away from him when he tries to grab it, like is literally keeping this thing that's going to get him back home away from him in some sort of weird unilateral decision of kidnapping. So Shane's sitting here going, I don't like how my life was. I don't like where it was. I don't like what was going on in it. I really want this do-over. And Pilot's like, cool story. I don't want a do-over. I want to go home. And Shane's like, just give it a few days. Just give it a few days and maybe you'll change your mind and blah, blah, blah. And eventually Pilot, in what I assume is supposed to be portrayed as him like kind of coming around and like feeling for Shane and being like, okay, we'll give it a few days so that you can kind of work through what you're working through. That's how it was supposed to come across. In my opinion, it came across as Stockholm Syndrome. Pilot realized that this psychotic chick who was willing to kidnap him in another time had his way home, and he was going to have to play nice with her. So he said, okay, you have the amulet. Clearly you're not willing to let me anywhere near it because you don't want to press it. So let's just play along with your little fantasy of what if. So sure, we'll play along. So they go through a few more days and whatnot. And then at that point, the book was kind of killed for me at that point. And they go through a little montage of them, you know, falling in love. It's hard for me to say that they fell in love when it was basically based in Shane kidnapping him in another time. So he does eventually say he loves her. He does eventually agree to break up with his girlfriend, and there's like a kerfuffle about that, but he does eventually break up with her. And then they decide together to not press the amulet, which they go back and forth a few times. You know, Shane says, no, we're not pressing the amulet. Pilot agrees to it. Pilot along the way becomes like obsessed with her and like needs her to survive and needs her in his life. And she decides, you know what? I'm not really doing the do-over as well as I hope, so maybe I'll just press the button and go home. And the funny thing is she like has the amulet in her hand to press, and it's not that she doesn't press it. She presses that thing. She's about to, without him, make another unilateral decision to go back home knowing he'll just forget it and he can't hold it against her anyway. The damn thing just doesn't work. She presses it and it doesn't work. She talks to him and she's like, I can't do this anymore. I gotta press the button. And he, in full Stockholm syndrome-ness, is like begging and pleading with her to not press the button, that he wants this do-over with her. He needs her in his life. He can't live without her. Da, 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 da. And she's like, okay, I won't press it, but you know, we have to take a break. I need to focus on me. And then like a magical montage happens of her like turning her entire life around and like suddenly succeeding at all her classes and suddenly succeeding at her internship and like balancing love and life and blah, blah, blah. Then we get another 7-year time jump, and he's a musician. She's a famous writer. She's got a great relationship with her parents because she like came clean and they respected that, and everything is perfect and wonderful and a happy ending for this girl who kidnapped her way into love. It really is. It's badly written. The characters are awful, and the only good character is Pilot's girlfriend, let's be real. And the storyline is choppy. There's random time jumps and then time back jumps and then time jumps again. And I might be able to forgive all that if it wasn't for the message that, hey, a good romance is just a kidnap away. And on that note, I'm going to end this. I will see you next time, writers. I hope it goes without saying, I do not recommend this book to anybody. I mean, this is a terrible book. There's many books out there that I would rather you read than this one. So, later.